the speaker today, and he's going to talk about webinar success formula. And this is episode number 4 in our MasterClass series. And you can see me with my geeky headset and Alfred, who's already on the other end of the line and end of the world because he's based on the East Coast in the US. And I see that we have participants from literally all over the world, from different parts of the US, Canada, South Africa, Europe. So that's fascinating. Now, a tiny bit of housekeeping. Just like in all other previous sessions, we are going to keep the video on for a little while. So you can see our faces, we can say hi, we can connect, but then we will turn that off to make sure that you can focus on the presentation itself. You are very welcome to enter any question into the chat box, which I'll be conveying to Alfred, and I'll be moderating those questions and adding a few questions on my end. And please do not think that I on purpose interrupt Alfred, because there's a tiny bit of lag between his voice and mine. And when I convey a question, that might sound a little bit of rude interruption, but that's definitely not the aim. We're making sure to have a good conversation here. Now, I think I'll turn off the camera at this point, or maybe after the next slide when I say a bit of introduction about Alfred, because he's got a fascinating background. He started as a marine biologist, but right now he's a full-time speaker and he helps small businesses, and he's a writer who understands complex ideas and translates that into practical pieces of advice. And he actually graduated from Harvard College, and he's the author of more than a dozen books. So he also authored a book called Power Marketing for Small Businesses, How You Can Boost Sales with Low-Cost Video, which obviously is going to be a topic he'll be partly tackling as part of speaker advice and how you can leverage webinars and videos. So Alfred has faced many of the same frustrations that many of you possibly have. So he's going to explain why he decided to make webinars a major portion of his revenue stream and how you can actually do that too. Now, with that in mind, I'll pass the floor to Alfred and we'll switch off the video feed at this point.
Thank you so much, Andres. I appreciate the introduction. Trying to get control here. So, as a speaker myself, I'm sure that many of you share the same frustrations that I've run into. We've seen, a lot of the listings that you can find online about opportunities to speak, and in many cases you find that it's a low pay opportunity, or they expect you to speak for free, which is kind of a very frustrating thing if you're trying to make a living at this. It's also very frustrating because there's a long lead time. Often it's 6 months to a year, but between when you put in your application and when you find out whether or not you've been chosen. And even then you may not hear anything. If they chose somebody else, you just hear crickets. And the third big frustration for me, at least, is, you're waiting for planners to pick you. I'm kind of a proactive person. I like to take charge and have a little more control over my own destiny. So I find all this really pretty frustrating. And I imagine that many of you have felt the same thing. If you've had any of these problems as a speaker, if you share this kind of frustration, I'd love it to you just to type in the chat box, me too, or yes, or something, just to let me know that we're sharing that same kind of struggle. Now, for me, I decided that I would try to do something about this. And for me, I don't know about you, but I see webinars all over the place. I've taken them. I've participated in them, and a lot of people are doing them. And I believe in the where there's smoke, there's fire kind of thing. If many people are putting all this much effort into webinars, there must be a good reason for it. So just think about it. I mean, how many of you have ever attended a webinar besides this one? I imagine everybody on this call. And And also, how many of you have ever bought something from watching a webinar? I mean, I know I do. I haven't been to a live class training session in years. I can't even remember the last time I went to one. But I've taken all kinds of training off the internet, and almost all of that I've taken as a result of a webinar, and paid good money for it, because the webinar gave me an opportunity to get a taste of what the presenter had to offer and hear, their point of view. And sometimes it fits me, and I'll end up buying. Sometimes I don't, because it doesn't feel like a good match, or I don't feel there's value there. But the point is, the webinar is now the shopping mall, for at least for me, for when it comes to training. And there are thousands of other people who've done that. And then there's the third possibility of that you may have even paid to attend a webinar. Again, I've done that, because the content that was being offered was so valuable to me that I felt that it was worth paying money rather than have to go to some university or some training session in some hotel. I can stay at my desk and get the training, so it's worth paying for it to get the online training. So got me thinking, if everybody else is doing this, maybe there's an opportunity for me here. And so after doing a lot of studying and taking some training last year, I decided this year that I was going to make webinars a key component in my business plan for 2016, and I'm well on pace to do at least a dozen webinars this year, at least one a month. So why did I do that? Well, let's just do some quick math. So if you think about it, let's say you had a speaking fee of $2,500. Just pull a number out of the air. Whatever number works for you, whatever you charge, fill in the blank with that kind of a number. But think about it. For $2,500, you're going to also spend time traveling. You may end up covering some of your own travel expense. So that eats into it. But what if you could stay home and stand at your desk like I'm standing right now and deliver your message directly to your audience without having to wait for a middleman a meeting planner to choose you? I mean, what benefit could that give you? If you think about it, imagine if you got 100 people to pay you $25. That will give you that same $2,500 that you would get from traveling, spending a couple days traveling to a speaking engagement. Or if it's a higher ticket kind of thing, if you can get 25 people to pay you $100, you come up with that same $2,500. So the math worked out for me. It made me realize that there was an opportunity here. And I've done both free webinars that lead to an opportunity to buy information products that I've got. I've also done paid webinars. The very first paid webinar that I did was about the kinds of wearable technologies that were shown at the CES show in Las Vegas last January. We took in thousands and thousands of dollars. We took over about $6,000 in my very first attempt at a paid webinar. So that the money's there, and it makes a lot of sense because it's very difficult to get people to show up for a training session someplace. So that's the reason that I decided that I would focus more on webinars this year.
Maybe, Alfred, if I could interject here something. And that makes me think, and it's a very interesting example that you brought, because I think a lot of people think about webinars as a classic conference or as a classic workshop where the entrance ticket must be fairly highly priced, and then the alarm bells go off and say, well, if I were that customer, I'm not sure I would pay $100 for a webinar. But then again, given the scalability and the relative unlimited ways you can do a webinar, I mean, unlimited in the sense that there's not necessarily a limit how many people can participate. So even if it's a relatively low price, the maths can easily add up.
Exactly. So let me just very quickly tell you a little bit about myself. Andres covered a lot of this. But basically, I've had a very successful career in explaining things to people. Started off with teaching to middle school students, but have gone on to worked in public relations for school districts, and then had a long run writing for major computer magazines, including PC Magazine, for more than 20 years. And as Andres mentioned, I've written more than a dozen books. And now I'm doing speaking. And basically the common theme here is that I've been very successful at explaining things to people in a way that they can use and make practical use out of. And so that's why the webinar strategy fits in so well for what I'm trying to accomplish. So let me just start off with the finish. This is the punchline for my presentation, and that is, in order to have a successful webinar program, you need three components. You need content, you need audience, and you need technology. And I'm going to talk about each one of those in some depth now, but basically, that's the magic formula. Those are the three things that you really need. So let's step through these one at a time and see what we get here. So content, and here I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. You wouldn't be on this call if you didn't already have a content that you've developed, a brand, a position, or something that you want to talk about, something you're passionate about. And maybe it's a personal story, maybe it's some knowledge that you have. But the important thing about it is, it's not just enough to be passionate. It's not just enough to know everything about it. One of the favorite sayings is that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your doorstep. Well, the fact is, that's not true. It doesn't matter how great your mousetrap is. If people don't want it, if people don't know about it, they're just not going to come to you. So to me, the important thing about your content is, one, it's got to be information that helps people, makes them feel better, gives them hope, inspires them, tells them how to do something they don't know how to do. I mean, for me, I'm much more focused on the things that are actually going to help them be more successful in their business, in whatever they're trying to do. So for me, the first point is it needs to be helpful. The second thing is it needs to be valuable. Now, even if you're giving a free webinar, you're asking people to give up on, typically a half hour to an hour of their time. And that's very, very valuable. And so if they're going to give you an hour of their time, you better make sure that you give them something that makes it worth it for them to do that. And then the third point that I want to make about your content is you need to make sure that people want it. And this sounds kind of silly, but I can tell you that one of my favorite mistakes that I've made over and over in my career is that I am very good at building the products that I think people need, but I don't, for a long time I didn't pay attention to what they want. So what people need doesn't really matter. What people want is, you need to give them what they want, and through that you can give them what they need. But you want to make sure, through testing the market or however you want to do it, surveys, you want to make sure that there's a market for what you're offering. Andres, do you have a question?
Yeah, I think I totally resonate with that. So in terms of the needs and the wants, and I think one of the most difficult things for speakers, and especially for up and coming or aspiring speakers, is finding whether your topic or what you talk about, which box does it fit in. We often think that just because I can inspire people, or just because I have a topic about marketing or bullying or social media, whatever it may be, people will want it. And it's really trying to test the market with different topics. And I think a good way of doing that could be testing it, whether through ads or just simply writing content as blog posts or other, and just seeing the reaction. So I think it's
Yes.
a very important piece of advice to keep that in mind. And curious to hear from you, how did you decide or find what topics you will talk about? Which box does it fit in?
Well, I start off with the passion, the things that I care strongly about. I mean, obviously, one of the things I care strongly about is my own speaking career, and I've had some success, and people have come to me and said, "Gee, how did you do that?" And so, responding to their interest has led me to create programs like this to help give back and share some of the things that I've learned. I've got other topics that I'm also very passionate about. I happen to edit a website about wearable technology for health and medical applications. It's called Health Tech Insider, and it's an area that I am very excited about, and so that's something that I also have talks about that I deliver. In fact, I'll be in Melbourne, Australia next March as the keynote speaker and for a digital health show that's going to be there. So but basically I start with the passion. This important step though is, as you say, is you got to test the market. And you mentioned a bunch of different tools that are useful. One of my favorite tools for testing the waters, so to speak, is to use surveys. And my favorite tool for using surveys is Google Forms. It's free on Google. You can create a survey form that has multiple choice questions or open-ended questions or all kinds of things. And so I use that a lot. You can also customize it so it looks like the rest of your pages. So that it's a very powerful, easy tool, and the best thing of all is it's free, and you can get some really valuable information. One of the important things about that is I also make sure to ask open-ended questions where people have to type out an answer. And the reason for that is when people respond to you that way, you will learn what language they use to describe the problem and how to and what sort of solution they're looking for. And so that actually gives you the language that you'll need to be able to pitch to them effectively. So anyhow, there's a lot about content, but we need to move along in order to stay on pace here. So the two big pieces remaining are audience and technology, and these are the things that a lot of speakers see as big challenges. And I totally get that because these are areas that I've struggled with as well. One of the advantages of waiting for a meeting planner to pick you is that they tell you where to show up, and when you get there, there's a room full of people. They handle that part for you. When you're doing your own webinar, it's a little different, and it's you're responsible for getting the people to show up, and that can be a challenge. How do you do that? Well, one of the best ways is to build your list. And people, I know I resisted this for years, thinking, I really don't want to spend the time building a mail list. I don't want to have a newsletter. I don't want to have to deal with mass emails to people. It turns out it's really not that hard. And if you have good information to share, people will be happy to trade, their email for information from you. And so it's an easy thing to do. In fact, I've got a free gift for you that I'm going to tell you about at the end, which you may be interested in, and you're a gift from me, and I'll be happy to email the report to you that you might find useful. So it's very easy to build your list. Another way to go is with advertising. You need to be careful here because it's very easy to spend a lot of money and get very little return with online advertising. Doing Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, it's possible to run up huge bills very, very quickly if you're not careful. So you need to study it, learn about it. Lead Pages is a service that has a bunch of free training. They have an excellent free course about Facebook advertising that you might want to look into. And then the third way, though, and this is the instant way to build a following, to get an audience for a webinar, and that's to use people who already have lists, and that's to use an affiliate program, which can be a very powerful way. I teamed up with one guy. I had a certain number of people signed up for a webinar. I teamed up with him. He did a mass mailing. His mailings doubled my registration. So if you can work out a deal with people who have those advanced, have those big lists, that can be very helpful. Andres, do you have a question there?
Yes. Maybe just a comment rather on the affiliates, because I think that's really the most overlooked yet the most effective way of reaching an audience. Because again, giving away a bit of the background information of our efforts to have audience for this webinar series, we did work with a few LinkedIn groups who cater to speakers. So we were trying to find the speakers and those who are aspiring trainers or moderators, to find them where they already were, and then partner with some of those LinkedIn groups. But that's just one way. But this is just to say that partnering with such organizations or with specific group moderators can work wonders.
Exactly. So the last part is technology, and there are tons of different opportunities out there and choices to make, and it can be bewildering. I totally accept that. For me, this comes a little bit more naturally, being somebody who's been deeply steeped in personal computer technology for 30 years. So for me, it's probably a little less intimidating and confusing as it might be for some people. But there are a couple of things that are basic principles that you can follow that I think would be useful. First of all, you want to control your costs. And there's a huge, when you investigate, there's a huge range of prices of what it's going to cost you to be able to put on your own webinars. And I encourage you to get a good program that matches your needs well, but that is one that's going to fit into your business plan, one that you'll be able to expect to be able to afford to pay at the end of the year after putting all your webinars together. Obviously, Click Meeting is the one that's being used by Speaker Hub today. Personally, the one that I use is a platform called Webinar Jam, which is a very powerful program, and also has links to many of the other services that'll make things easier. And that's my second point. You want integrated solutions. I use services such as Lead Pages that I've already mentioned, Samcart as a shopping cart. I use Stripe for processing my credit card payments. I use programs such as Drip or iContact to manage my mail list. And the thing about it is all those services are designed to work together. So they pass the information back and forth. I don't have to copy and paste things from one service to another. Don't have to type in orders to my shopping cart for people. And so the bottom line here is you want to be able to automate everything. And so pick solutions that are going to work together, that are going to be affordable, and allow you to automate everything. Andres, do you have any other questions at this point?
I think I'm also learning here, because in terms of automation, we do quite a bit of legwork on our end, but I totally agree with you that you'd like to do that. As long as you have a handful of participants in an event, or you just have a relatively limited number of events, it's perfectly fine to do it manually. But the minute you're trying to scale up and you don't want to be victim of your own success, that's why automation becomes an important aspect.
Exactly, exactly. So I mentioned at the beginning that I've got a free gift for you, and so it's here. What I've got is a report on 3 hardware recommendations that I've got for you that will help you create a much more successful, much better webinar experience for your participants. And none of these are expensive. Nothing costs. They all cost less than $100. And one tip that I showed Andres before as we were warming up, showed him a lighting tip that will make a huge difference. And the device that I use costs less than $7. How did you like that light thing that I showed you, Andres?
That was excellent. It literally puts you in the best possible light as a speaker, as long as you decide to use video. And that's actually a good question of what your suggestion is, because we do here a hybrid solution of introducing ourselves with video and then not. What is your general experience with that?
Okay, that's a great question. In fact, I'll leave this up for a little bit for people to so they can copy down the link, or actually Andres could maybe you or somebody could
Sure.
type the
I'll
link into the chat box while I'm talking. That would be helpful.
I'll type that in. Yes.
So video or not video? A lot of people say I don't like video. I'm told I have a face for radio, and I get that, and it's people can be shy, but being on video is no different than being on stage, and the same qualms and nervousness that people have about being on stage, they can have about being on video. The fact is, after you've done it the 10th time or the 50th time, it's going to be so natural and so normal for you, it won't be a problem. So what's the mix? When I'm doing training kinds of things where I have a lot of content to cover, I'll often use the slides like I've used today to make it easier for people to track along. However, I do like to use video a lot in my webinars, and the reason for that is one of the most important principles about business, marketing, and sales is that I believe that people don't buy from companies. They buy from people, and they buy from people that they know, like, and trust. KLT. It's a widely publicized principle. And how are people going to know and like and trust you? They're going to want to have interaction with you, and that's why video is so powerful, and that's why having you appear on the screen during your webinars is so powerful, because people can see you, they can get a better feel for who you are, what kind of person you are, and can connect with you better. So my default mode is to be on camera and then add the visuals as needed, but rather than start with the visuals and add the video as needed. So does that help?
I think so, and I think there's another aspect, because many of those on the call right now are into training. Obviously, a lot of them are speakers, and I think that when you would like to position yourself or market yourself as a speaker, the webinar, and especially with a video, gives a different impression, because webinars are very, very good for workshop type of instruction systems. But then with video, it turns itself into a slightly different genre, where you really position yourself as a potential speaker who has a lot of knowledge about the substance as well. So I think in terms of marketing yourself, apart from the revenue generation aspect, webinars can be very powerful. What is your experience in that regard?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it to me, as you say, it depends on the content and it depends on the audience. Certainly, if I'm in front of people who I'm hoping will book me as a live speaker, I definitely want to show them myself on video so that they can see it and get a picture, get an image of of how I operate and what I look like as I'm presenting and so forth. So, but yeah, there's no one answer to this. That's for sure. So do we have any other questions? I did see one question to go. Oh, somebody asked about the problem that they have with, it was Gloria. A lot of people sign up for a webinar, but then they don't show. And you'll find as you get into this that this is totally common. And there's an outfit called ON24 that is a very high-end webinar service that hosts webinars for corporate clients. But they have a publication they put out every year called Webinar Benchmarks. And I encourage you to, I'll put the company's name in the chat box here. And they do a report every year about webinar benchmarks. I encourage you to go find that on the web if you can. One of the things it talks about is what's the normal metric? What kind of things can you expect from webinars? And as it turns out, if you can get half your people to show up, half your registrants to show up, you're doing very well. And that's been my experience as well. I've had webinars that I've promoted to a warm list, my own mail list and other email lists that other people have. And I've had, I think it was 60-75% of the people showed up. I had a good registration based on a totally cold Facebook advertising project, campaign, and I only got about 10% of the people to show up. So, if you can get half the people to show up, you're doing well. That's a good number. For me, I'll share my numbers with you. If I can get half the people to show up, that's good. If I can get half of those people to stay to the end, that's good. Normally, my webinars run a little bit, quite a bit better than half of them staying till the end. And I believe that that's a result of the fact that I focus so much on trying to deliver quality information. And then of those who stay till the end, I typically get a purchase from about 10% of those people. So a half show up, a half stay to the end, and about 10%, 1 in 10, will actually buy something. But again, get the ON24 benchmark report, and you'll see some of the industry stuff that they've got. That's got other information like what's the best time and day of the week to hold a webinar and other things. So that's can be useful.
That's a good point, because we're struggling also with finding the best time, and we did a little survey. Having a global audience makes it really difficult what time we have our webinar. Or we make it possible for most of the US. In the series, we're going to have a speaker from Australia. Now, that's a real tough nut to crack, to find a good time that works on Europe, Australia, and the US. But yeah, there are certainly ways to optimize it depending on where the majority of your audience is. You want to
the people in Australia are used to staying up in the middle of the night for webinars at this point. So
I see. We do have all our respect for them.
One other point that I would make is that that replays can suppress turnout. Okay, I have almost never had a sale from a replay. So if you are trying to sell something through your webinar, my advice is to not offer a replay. It's maybe offered it a couple different times, one during business hours, one during the evening. But if you're selling something, my recommendation is to not offer a replay, because people who go to replays aren't engaged. They fast forward through it. They jump out much earlier than on average than most people. I just find it's really not worthwhile. On the other hand, if you're doing something that's more purely informational like this one, a replay can be great because it's evergreen, and it will give a a low energy way of prospects to interact with you. So so it's you know, your mileage may vary, but for me, my experience with replays when you're trying to get people to buy something has not worked out well. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, here's a question that I think would be of interest to most, which concerns about marketing yourself as a speaker. If that's your primary goal, not so much on training or revenue generation, but really getting more visibility as a speaker so you get more invitation for other webinars or for keynote opportunities like the one that you're going to have in a couple of months. What is your advice to those?
Okay, so for me, the place to start is the thought leadership. You need to be perceived. You need to have the reputation of being an expert. You need to have the reputation, establish the reputation of having valuable information that you can share on the topic. And it's all, you know, all the standard advice holds here. Be active in social media. If it's a professional kind of topic, join the LinkedIn groups and be active in the discussions there. So people are used to seeing your name and hearing the kinds of views you have got, and just so you have a presence. Again, holding webinars to build your speaking business. If you're looking to get booked, one of the things to keep in mind there is it's rare that your audience is going to book you. In other words, your target audience. So say you have a topic that appeals to human resource managers. Okay, it's not the human resource managers who are going to hire you to bring you in. Okay, if you're going to be talking to corporate clients, it's usually the director of training or something like that who's going to bring you in. If you're trying to talk to associations, it's not the members, it's the meeting planners of those associations who are going to bring you in. So you have to think in terms of what kind of content can you offer that will be of interest and useful to the people who are going to be making the decisions. And so that can be very different from the kind of content that you would be offering to your target audience. Right. So
that's a very, very important piece of advice. And maybe you can try to, with that in mind, you can try to urge those members of the audience who you know would be in touch with those who make the decisions. So consider much of your audience as influencers and urge them to say, well, if you like this, why don't you recommend that to the person in charge who's going to organize the next Congress or national meeting or similar event.
I just want to, I see that Gloria and Marcus are having a conversation in the chat box about what to do with replays. And Marcus mentions that some people take a replay and try to sell it again as a live event. And boy, I just had that experience as a consumer with a recent training that was offered by an individual who I won't name their service. But I watched the original and then I watched the replay, and they made the replay. They didn't sell the replay as a replay. They sold it as a live event, and it was in fact a replay of the one that I'd already watched. And I go back to my original point about know, like, and trust. And trust is such a fragile commodity. It's so easy to blow it up. And when you do something like that, it immediately, at least for me, it immediately makes me as a consumer doubt everything you say. Because if you say this is live and it's clear that it's not live, then what else are you lying about? You know, it's not transparent, it's deceitful. And so I may not have the most effective marketing and business strategies out there, but I will tell you that my integrity is the top concern, and I'm more than happy to give up a few sales in return for being honest and open and transparent and building trust with my audience. So my advice is don't do anything that will give your customer or your prospect an opportunity to doubt you. And trying to pawn off a recording as a live session, I think, is an excellent way to blow up that trust. So
that's absolutely true. Here's a question, Alfred, before we finish in a few minutes, is what type of topics do you think would fit for a webinar and what would not? So what is the kind of topic or subject that you think would just simply not be suitable for a webinar and it should be handled in a different format, perhaps in an in-person format?
Exactly. Good question. For me, webinars are really best suited for what I would call a one-way flow of information. We have the chat box, we have other tools at our disposal, but for the most part, webinars are a bit distant, and it's really hard to have effective interaction between the presenter and the audience. It's not like in a live audience where you're making contact, where you can ask a question and get into an exchange about it with everybody listening in. So for me, the kinds of content that are best for webinars are the ones where you're providing useful information, and two, in a way that showcases your talent and your knowledge. And it's really the start of a conversation. It's not the conversation in its own. If you want to have a heavy audience interaction, if you're going to be doing, working out examples with people live in the audience, I think live works better for that. So as for the kinds of things where you're sharing information, I think webinars work really, really well. But where you're trying to, where you need more of that workshop interaction kind of thing, there are other platforms that work better. Either live, there are online ways of doing it, but your typical webinar is not the best way.
I agree, and I think that given, of course, we're trying to be as close to our audience as possible, but given a relative lack of intimacy that you could easily get in a room with in-person participants, I think if a training is more about getting people to open up and share information, probably an in-person format is better. But webinars are fantastic for that sort of information flow. Here's a question to Alfred about what technology exists that allows the presenter to appear on screen alongside content.
Oh, great question. There are some platforms like this one where I believe you can see that. I can't see what you see, but I believe you can see the video and the slides. However, even if you're using a platform that doesn't support that, there are add-on products that you can get that can do a lot of different things. For example, can allow you to overlay the slides on the video image of yourself. And they're not too technical. They're getting much easier to use, and that's one possible way to go. Another way that's really, really easy is some webinar platforms will allow you to have two presenters on the screen at the same time. So two windows, each showing one of the presenters. What you can do, and this is something I do a lot, is I will set up my slides using Adobe to set it up as a PDF, and I'll put that on my laptop, and I'll sign in to the webinar from my laptop as a second presenter. And then I can have myself on the screen for my video through my computer, and then use my laptop to project the slides. Tom is asking what are the names of some of the products. Tom, I don't have that at the tip of my tongue, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to type my email address in the chat box. Send me an email, and I will.
It's up on the
Yep.
screen.
It's up on the screen.
Yeah.
aportverizon.net. I put it in the chat box. Tom, if you want to send me an email, I'll look up some of those things, some of the different products that can help you with this. And anybody else that we've got the contact us screen up now. Anybody else on this call or on the replay, if you have a question about this, any of this, please feel free to contact me directly. I'd be happy to answer whatever questions I can as best I can. I'm a big believer in the rising tide raising all boats, and so I'm happy to share whatever I can that could be helpful to you. So please feel free to reach out to me. So,
Fantastic.
Andres, I guess we run over a little bit. Let me just do a quick summary here.
Please do.
So the bottom line here is webinars can make a very important piece of your business plan. It's working for me, and I'm very happy with the effort and time that I put into it. And I encourage other speakers and coaches to take the time to look into it and think about how they can merge it with their existing business plan. The key is you need content that people want and that's valuable to them. You need to get your audience. And as we've said, building an affiliate program is a great way to get access to a lot of people very quickly at no cost. You may end up giving up, half of the sale, but for me, getting 50 cents for a dollar that I wasn't going to get otherwise, I'm more than happy to do that. And finally, the technology is there. The key is watch your costs and make everything as integrated and automated as possible, because it's you don't want to have to spend all your time working with the minutia. You want to be able to spend your time focusing on your audience and what you can do for them. And I'll just repeat, this is my free gift for you. If you want to get the free hardware tips, just go to this site and you'll be able to get it emailed to you right away. And again, feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that I possibly can. And so thank you, Andres, for this opportunity to talk to everybody and share what I know. I hope it's been useful.
Thanks so much, Alfred. Really, really appreciate your time and all your practical tips. That's great. Now, all that's left for me is to remind everyone about the next session, which is happening on the 9th of November with Sufit, who's an author of a book called Speakers Step into the Spotlight. Now, with that, to let you know that we'll be sharing the recording of this webinar, and we'll not present it as a live session, even if we replay it at any point. It's definitely a recording, freely shared with everyone. And we're also going to be offering a transcript, and that will take a little bit of time to put online, but watch out for that, because as with all previous episodes, we're going to be offering a written version of what Alfred has shared with you. So thank you so much for everyone for being here. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll convey your message to Alfred or to him directly. And we're very happy to hear from you, have questions from you, or if you'd like to have other topics that we cover, please let us know. So thanks again for being here. Have a good day.